Hi everybody, I am Regina Mahoney, City Manager for the City of Essex Junction, and we are here for the next installment of Junction City News. Today I have with me Chris Ewan, the Community Development Director for Essex Junction, and Chris will be talking to us about the form-based code. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a big project for the city, and I'm glad to have the chance to walk through in plain language this proposal before it is brought to the Planning Commission and the City Council for consideration.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get right to it. So to start, can you explain what our Land Development Code is?
Sure thing. The Land Development Code, or the LDC, is the city's rule book for how land gets used and developed. If you want to build a house, if you want to put an addition on your business, or if you want to develop a new apartment building, the LDC tells you what's allowed on your property and what the review process looks like. So it covers everything from zoning districts, what uses are allowed where, to how big buildings can be, to parking, landscaping, and signs. So this code has, has existed for quite some time, and it's really evolved over the years, with the current version being last updated in 2025. The current proposal is a set of amendments to that code. We're not starting from scratch. And the biggest piece of this change is going to be the form-based code for the city center and the Pearl Street corridor.
Okay, awesome. So why is the city considering these amendments, and where did they come from?
So this comes directly out of the Connect the Junction Transit-Oriented Development Master Plan, which the City Council adopted in December 2025 after a long public process. The starting points for that plan was really housing need. Municipalities across Vermont have been assigned housing targets to plan towards based on the state's 2025 Housing Needs Assessment. That assessment found that Chittenden County is likely to need about 32,000 new homes by 2050. And Essex Junction's share of that regional target is about 3,100 homes. Right now, we're well short of that pace today, and it shows up in rents, in home prices, in vacancy rates. We know that people who work here increasingly are having trouble affording to live here. So this plan concluded that the best place to absorb that amount of growth is in the city center and along the Pearl Street corridor, near the train station, near bus routes, and the existing water and sewer infrastructure. That, rather than spreading it onto our outlying neighborhoods or onto open land. So to test what that looks like, our consulting team for Connect the Junction ran a capacity analysis on the area under different height limits. So under the existing limits, 4 stories with the 5th story allowable for affordable housing developments, this area would be able to accommodate about 1,144 new homes by 2050. Mm-hmm. If we raise that to 8 stories, with the 8th story being tied to affordable housing, we're talking about 1,662. And at 10 stories, again with the last story being tied to affordable housing, it's projected that there'd be capacity for about 2,000 new units within this area. So even with this tallest scenario, it doesn't help us get all the way to the housing targets on its own, but it does allow the majority of the city's growth to occur within the most transit accessible areas. And I think here's the parts that I want to be upfront about to the public. The heights and density conversation really happened during the master plan process, and the city council adopted that plan with that understanding. But this form-based code now is not intended to reopen the question about whether to grow here, but it's the tool that allows the city to turn that plan's vision into enforceable rules. So including guardrails on how that growth has to look and feel. There's kind of another piece of this, form-based code specifically. So today, a lot of design review downtown is based on whether a project is harmonious with its surroundings, and that's rather subjective. It's hard to apply consistently, and it's hard to defend if it gets appealed. This form-based code proposal replaces much of the existing text with clear, measurable standards that neighbors, developers, and the review board can all read in the same way.
Great. Okay. All right. So you have talked about form-based a little bit here already. Can you talk a little bit more about what that actually means and what these standards cover?
Sure thing. So conventional zoning mostly regulates use, what activity is allowed on what property. But a form-based code focuses more on the physical form and shape of buildings and how they line the street, how tall a building is, where it sits on the lot, how it meets the sidewalk, and what's happening at the street level. So, I think the proposed standards cover 6 things, and I'd suggest maybe we walk through some of them.
Okay.
So there's building height and its relationship to the street, protections of where these buildings meet residential neighborhoods, how buildings meet the sidewalk, so facade design as well, parking placement, and landscaping.
Great. So these are a lot of the things that impact, like how people feel when new development goes in. These are a lot of the different subject areas that new growth goes through that really can have an impact on how people feel about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think it's also important to note what's not changing with this proposal, and that's this form-based code doesn't change what uses are allowed. The use chart still governs that, and historic resources still continue to be protected under the historic resource overlay rules. And site plan review still exists, so projects still do go through a public review process under the Development Review Board.
Great. Okay, so let's take a look at each of these. So building height. What does the proposed code allow, and where would these heights apply?
Sure. So we do know this is the piece that we hear the most about and have the most questions about. So yes, this proposed code does allow for taller buildings in parts of downtown and along the Pearl Street corridor than what's there today. And that's following the housing targets from the Connect the Junction plan. But if we look at the plan that's on the screen right now, that shows the proposed height limits by sub-district. Looking at downtown, it's kind of broken up by quadrant. The more historic area where the Brownell block and the city offices and the library is, it'll continue to be limited to 4 stories plus 1 for the affordable housing bonus. The rest of downtown, we're talking about 7 plus 1, just to kind of have a transition to this lower height area. And the southeast corner that's bounded by Park Street and Maple Street, the proposal is for a height limit of 9 stories plus 1 for the affordable housing bonus. And this area is the area that's kind of more the lots are larger, and it's more industrial right now, and we do expect bigger changes over there. Mm-hmm. The rest of the Pearl Street corridor is also proposed to change to a height limit of 9 stories plus 1, but we are phasing that in over time. The area further west, so between the CVE and Susie Wilson Road, that's going to come in at a later phase. There's some sewer infrastructure work that needs to be done before that growth can occur there, but it is a part of the Connect the Junction plan.
Okay.
But I think it's probably important to talk about how this plan goes beyond the numerical height limits. So what we have on the screen here is an illustration of building height and how it relates to the width of the street, and that's what we call the street room ratio. A tall building on a wide street feels quite different from the same building on a narrow street. So this ratio compares building heights with the width of the space between buildings, and that includes the street itself, the sidewalks, and the setbacks. So, this is an example, this is an illustration that would be in the code of the upper and lower limits. 1 to 1 is the upper limit, and 1 to 2 is the lower limit. And the 1 to 2 is to also make sure that we don't end up with a situation with the landscape that looks too barren. But the 1 to 1 is the kind of upper limit to make sure it's not too imposing from the point of view of the street. Okay. For example, this 1 to 2 ratio that's shown on the left over here is an example of what wouldn't be allowed, but with some tweaks, as shown in the examples on the right, a builder would be able to meet that 1 to 1 ratio either with some step backs, which means that the front portion of the building is not as tall, the full height only comes in further back, or the other option would be just to push the entire building a little bit further back to increase the amount of room you're working with.
Got it.
Yeah, so let's take a look at a real-life example over here. 17 Park Street. This is one of the most the recently completed building along Park Street. It is 5 stories in height, and it's about 56 and a half feet in height. On a street room with a street width, that's about 72.8 feet in width. So the ratio here would be 0.78. So that a repeat of that, or at least this type of height along the street would be allowed.
And in this same example, this new building at 17 Park Street could be taller further back under these regulations, but not up close on the street like this.
Right. Okay. So just with a little bit of imagination over here, we can imagine if we added 2 stories to this, right up to the to the line where the building currently is. This would be 7 stories. So the height would be about 79.5 feet in height, and that would exceed the allowable street room ratio. You would have to make a design change in order to make this work. Okay. The top stories would either have to be pushed back a little bit further, or the building would have to be redesigned or repositioned. Okay. So there's also proposals about what we call residential adjacency. So, where these taller buildings are close to existing lower heights residential districts, we do understand that a tall building right up to the lot line can be imposing. It could cast shadows, and that's really not what we're intending for here. So the residential adjacency rules would add an additional setback requirement when the height difference between the maximum allowable height and in the adjacent district and where you're trying to build is 4 stories or more. Something like this to illustrate that.
Okay, so the next topic is how buildings meet the sidewalk. What does the code say about that? Yeah,
so I think this is where form-based code really differs from conventional zoning, because this code defines a menu of what we call frontage types or standards that are ways that buildings can meet the streets. So this is a list of 6 of these frontage types. For example, there's one frontage type called the linear frontage for storefronts built right up to the sidewalk, with only with active commercial spaces. You can have a building set back behind a publicly accessible plaza. That would be the plaza frontage, with seating, gathering space. There could be another example as a residential building with stoops and kind of a landscape transitions, or a landscape setback for more privacy. So each frontage type is illustrated in detail in the code. For example, this is the plaza frontage, just blown up a little bit. It prescribes the type of amenities that that each one would have to include. So plaza frontages, you would need to provide some weather protection over the main entry. You would need to provide seating, pedestrian amenities, and such. And it's pretty specific when it comes to applying this. There's a different type of amounts of setback that would be required, and certainly we have an example, kind of just a cutout from the code over here that just shows the amount of detail that each type of frontage gets. Okay. So I think the point over here is to be activating the space that's between the building and the streets, and to contribute to a sidewalk that's comfortable and interesting to walk along, which is the whole premise of a walkable downtown.
Yeah, great. Okay, so you also mentioned facade design. What does the code require there? So in other words, what materials are on the building itself?
Yeah. So I think well, we'll take a step back over here. If buildings are going to be taller and going to be closer to the sidewalk, what the pedestrian experience is at eye level is going to matter a lot. So the facade standards are how the code ensures that these larger buildings still feel like they belong on a village street. So first of all, no blank walls. Along the frontage, blank wall segments where there's no features, windows, doors, or a transparency can't exceed 20 feet. So you will not get a featureless wall running the length of a block under this code. Right. So secondly, these buildings have to be articulated at the base, and that means the first floor or two where the people actually experience them have to look distinct and different from the upper floor treatments. And that could include the use of columns, changes in materials, or regular window patterns, just so that a bigger building reads as more of a series of human-scaled pieces than one large monolith.
Got it.
So thirdly, materials. I don't have a slide for this because we can use our imagination here. About at least 75% of each principal facade will have to be using these prescribed primary durable materials, and that includes brick, natural stone, wood, or high-quality fiber cement, and certain metals. And secondary materials will only be allowed for kind of trim and accents.
Okay. And primary facade, does that mean the side of the building that's facing the street?
That's the side that's facing the street, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the last two items on your list were parking and landscaping. What does the code say about those? So
on parking, this code really focuses on placement and on screening. The general rule is that parking goes beside or behind buildings, screened from the streets, instead of a parking lot being the first thing you see from the sidewalk. So this is an example of how that would be applied. The main street is on the front, and if there's a surface parking lot, it's accessed from the side. But we also know multi-story parking lots are going to become more of a thing in Essex Junction with increased development. They would need to be screened from view with an approved frontage type. And in many cases, that would mean a liner building, which means residential or commercial uses facing the sidewalk. But this isn't just theoretical. When the Planning Commission worked through this code, they looked around the region for different examples, and just down the road in Winooski, this is one of the buildings that serves as an example. So it's a building out front with a parking screen from view. I think most people looking at this building might not notice that the first floor is actually parking. It's built. The window pattern and the facade is built to blend in. Yet from the back, you'd be able to access this entire first floor of parking. And we wanted to make sure that something like this would be possible. You'll see that on the right side of this building, it's also there's also an active commercial use that would be encouraged by this code. Another example would be this other location in Winooski. It's got ground level parking. It's a parking structure. It does not have the same kind of liner building, but it does have a certain amount of landscaping and a buffer that delineates the space between the sidewalk and the parking lot. But the code will kind of lean towards more of a liner building, more of a built-in facade. What I have up right now is an example of the landscaping requirements. There's a big change, a big shift in how that will work as well. This code will shift more from a spending requirement to a performance requirement. So today's rule says you have to spend 2 to 3% of construction costs on landscaping, and that measures money, but not results. So this new system is points-based, and the project earns points based on what actually gets planted and built, like shade trees, green space, the quality of site design.
Awesome. So does a development need to hit a certain score from all of these in order to meet the requirement?
Yes, there is a minimum score threshold of 30, and the denominator is based on the project, the lot size, and the affected area.
Okay. All right. So, what are the next steps in the process?
So the immediate next step is this Wednesday, July 22nd. I'll be introducing this proposal to the City Council at their regular meeting. And that's really, it's an introduction. It's not a final vote, but it'll be a good time to get a feel for what remaining issues and questions there are that the Planning Commission needs to look at. The Planning Commission has been reviewing the drafts all spring and summer, and their work continues. But we do expect that it is likely that they will be finalizing and preparing for a public hearing dedicated to this topic in September.
Right. Okay, so is there anything else you would like to add?
I'd say there are two things. So firstly, all of these documents, the draft code, the Connect the Junction plan, and the meeting schedule is going to be on the city website at essexjunction.org/departments/community-development/form-based code. You can also just Google essexjunction.org, Essex Junction form-based code, and this is likely the first thing you'll find. But keep an eye on that for updates on the scheduling of the next meetings, but also just to find the draft and explore it yourself. Secondly, I'd really encourage people to share their thoughts at the upcoming meetings, because this process works better when we hear from people on the record while the draft can still change, not after adoption. But that's it for me.
Great. So it's sometimes helpful to remind folks that when there is a proposed development that happens someplace in town, it's usually a little late to really engage in the rules around what governs that proposed development. This is a stage in the process to really ask questions and provide some feedback on what those rules are going to be before they are finalized by the Planning Commission and City Council ultimately. So that's great. Thank you for giving everybody a preview. Okay, So I think that is it on the form-based code. We do have some, oh, there's the website. We'll leave that up for just a second. And then we've got a few other, oh, these are last month's events. We've already gone and had the amazing 100th anniversary party at Brownell last Friday. So coming up, we have a number of Main Street Park summer performances happening. July 21st, we have Alex the Magician at 6 p.m. July 28th, we have Green Mountain Swing at 6 p.m. August 4th, the Very Merry Theater at 6 p.m. And then switching over to the library, on August 6th is the Teen Senior Reading Party at 6 p.m. And then on August 7th is the Summer Reading Celebration with No Strings Marionettes at 5:30 at the library. So lots going on in the city all summer long. So hopefully folks can come out. Chris, thanks so much for joining. And I will see everyone next time for the next Junction City News.